All right, so here we are back again in the essential space with Jake Minot. Let's talk about the disinfecting, and we just want to talk a little bit about surfaces. That was somewhere we kind of left off last time, talking about surfaces and what can easily be effectively disinfected, and just kind of give us some limitations to the products we have, and just talk about that a little bit.
Okay. So all of our disinfectants are going to be good for any hard, non-porous surfaces. So floors, desks, chairs, anywhere in the restrooms it can be used. And then on the flip side of that, the surfaces that you're not going to want to use this is going to be any soft, porous surfaces. So it is not good for carpets, different types of fabric, things like that. It's not gonna, it can't stick to the surface long enough to hit that 10-minute dwell time so that it can properly disinfect.
Fantastic. When you say that about the soft porous areas, will our product cause harm to those? Like, let's say we have a non-porous that's right next to a porous. Would we be causing any harm on those?
No, you wouldn't cause any harm. Especially with our neutral germicidal, because it is a neutral pH, it's not going to affect those soft porous surfaces. It's just not going to effectively disinfect those because it can't cling to the surface. It's going to go down into the surface and not remain wet for those 10 minutes.
Okay. Onto those surfaces, do we have to clean the surfaces prior to disinfecting? Is that something we need to do? And what do you think about that?
Yes, I absolutely recommend cleaning the surface before you disinfect, especially if it's visibly soiled and you can see some buildup on there. You're going to want to remove that. But a lot of times you can't see that there's actually soil on the surface because it's so small. So
Okay.
we want to make sure that we clean the surfaces beforehand. Not only will it remove soil and debris from the surface, it's also going to remove some germs that are on that surface. So you're actually helping your disinfectant out by removing as many of the germs as possible before you even apply the disinfectant.
Okay, great. So it's doubly effective. That's great. So when we're talking about different surfaces, specifically in a school or in a cafeteria of sorts, we're obviously going to come in contact with food. So let's talk a little bit about what we would do to the surfaces to disinfect. What would be the process? And I'm kind of looking for a before, during, and after scenario. Like, what are the things that you recommend for these types of surfaces?
Yeah, so before, just as we were previously discussing, we're going to want to clean those surfaces first, especially if you're talking about cafeterias in schools. I know I have two boys, so I know the tendency to drop food and, spills on the table. So we're obviously going to want to clean those surfaces beforehand. Then during, what you're going to want to look for is the proper dwell time. So once you saturate that surface with the disinfectant, you're going to want to make sure that it remains wet for 10 minutes. And that's going to give it the proper amount of time to kill all the germs and viruses and bugs that are present on that surface.
Right. And is that something that's across all our products, Jake? I mean, is there any products that have a lesser dwell time?
No, not currently. 10 minutes is kind of the industry standard. There are some out there that are a little bit quicker, but most of the disinfectants that you're going to run into are 10-minute dwell times.
Right. Okay. So then tell us a little bit about after on a food service.
So after, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to rinse that surface with a clean cloth or rag and potable water to remove any residual disinfectant that's left on that surface. If we're not talking about food contact surfaces, that's not as important. You don't have to wipe off any residual. But when we're talking about food, we want to be a little more careful about what we ingest on the off chance that happens. So we want to make sure we use a clean cloth. And for that, I really highly recommend people to use a color coded system with your rags. So you don't bring a rag that you just wipe the toilet off with into the cafeteria and then wipe off the residual disinfectant with that. That's never a good thing. So we want to make sure we use a clean cloth to wipe that off so we're not reintroducing germs and viruses and bugs and things like that back onto that surface.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you talk about food contact surfaces, you kind of brought up a point there. So, would a cafeteria table actually be food contact? Because you'd have a plate or a tray, usually in a cafeteria, you have that underneath you. Is that not what we consider food contact? Are we more considering a countertop where you'd be preparing food, more of a food contact surface?
Yeah, you're right. That would be more of a food contact
Okay,
surface. I like to be safe just on the off chance that that
sure.
happens. The tendency of kids drop food on a table and scoop it back up and throw it in their mouth. So we want to make sure that everybody's being safe out there.
Sure. So, Jake, before we close today, is there anything that we didn't cover that you want to tell us about? Do you have any, just kind of add any last parting words?
So the thing that I would end with is, and this is something that I've ran into just about everywhere I go. People need to make sure that we're following the proper dilution ratios that are listed on the labels, and that's whether it's our disinfectant or anybody else's. That's probably the biggest mistake that I see people make is they'll take a concentrated disinfectant and they'll add it stronger than the label suggests because we all kind of fall under this fallacy that more is better, right?
Right.
So if we're mixing disinfectant into a spray bottle, if it's a concentrated product, more times than not, it's going to look almost like water. It may have just a slight tint to it. And we're all kind of under this Windex fallacy where it has to be really deep blue. Otherwise, it's not going to be strong enough. We fall under this fallacy that, hey, if I add a little bit more disinfectant, it's going to make it stronger so it'll kill faster or kill better or whatever the verbiage is there. But the truth of the matter is, the dilution ratios that are on these labels, when it's mixed at that dilution, that's when the product is at its absolute strongest. That's when it's designed to kill these specific bugs that we're trying to kill. So make sure you're following the label directions. Make sure you're keeping the proper dwell time, and that's gonna effectively disinfect the surfaces and make sure that we can stop the spread and help everybody come out of this pandemic.
Fantastic. I really enjoyed listening to this today, Jake. That was some great information. We're going to continue this conversation, and if anything comes up, we're going to keep going and talking about this. So I really appreciate your time today, and we'll continue this conversation. And it was great talking to you, and you have a great day now.
Absolutely, I enjoyed it. Thanks.
That's all we have for this episode, but we invite you to come back soon and spend more time in the essential space. For more information, leave comments or questions on LinkedIn.